Welcome to episode 6 of the Hike Files podcast. I'm Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? A little bit of housekeeping up front. I finally got hikefiles.com up and running the way I'm pretty happy with. Got it moved off the old host. They weren't moving the domain name. It finally got transferred. It's all set. It's ready to go. Also, a little bit of a studio change. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube or on Spotify and you've got the video up and you're watching the video, and that's how you've been watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, you'll notice you don't see the wall of stuff hanging anymore. All my gear, it's still here. It's over there. It's up against that wall. I moved the camera, changed a couple things just to make it look a little bit more professional. Looks a little bit more like a professional podcast now. Videocast. I don't get a lot of views on the video, but maybe it's because it looked like garbage. Just saying. So we'll try this now. So with all that out of the way, let's get on to the point. Where to find trails, campsites, and things like that can be an obstacle, especially when you're beginning. In my opinion, I've always found that accessing public lands, such as state parks and state forests, is the best way to begin. If you are having a hard time finding information on your local state parks and state forest, I made a list of all 50 states' departments of parks and forests. The link will be in the show notes, or you can just go to hikefiles.com. Up in the top, you'll see a link in the menu for articles. As of this recording, it's the only article in there. It's called 50 States, Parks and Forests. But if you're listening to this after the fact and there's more articles in there, that's the one you want to look for. 50 States, Parks and Forests. What I've found while making this list, though, is that all states have state parks, but not all seem to have state forests. Some states bundle them together and manage them under the same department. Some states, mostly out west, forego state forests altogether. And I think it's because of the amount of BLM land, such as national forest, that they have. But that's not always the case. So under every state in this list, you'll see the state park office or the department that handles state parks listed first. And then if they have a separate forestry department or a forestry department at all, then it'll be listed second. Now, a list is great, but which one is best for beginners? I guess it depends on beginners of what. So if it's beginning hiking and camping, if you're just new to the outdoors in general, then I suggest state parks are usually your best bet. And here's why. They have better marked, maintained, and mapped trails, usually. Almost always have trails of varying difficulties, from easy to most difficult. Most of the time they're noted as such as well. Ample parking and accessibility at trailheads, a lot of times with facilities. Park offices with information. A lot of times they have classes or events where they'll teach you hiking basics, or they'll do guided hikes, teach you about the local wildlife and plant life and things like that. That stuff is always helpful when you're new. I don't know about for every state, but a lot of times those classes you sign up for them, but a lot of times they're free. I can't guarantee that. I don't work for any state park service, so check with that. Campsites in state parks often have easily accessible water, restrooms, showers, tables, and fire rings, as well as garbage. They're usually flat and open, and you can drive right up to them, if not into them. Often, bear boxes or poles are available if they have walk-in sites, and in most state parks, walk-in sites usually aren't that far. It's not like you're hiking in miles. This is all generalized information. Not all parks will be the same. Not even all parks in the same state park system will be the same, much less different states. Some states have massive state park systems, 200 state parks. They're well maintained, very organized. They put a lot of attention to detail in these state parks. Some states don't have quite as many. They do. It's not like they neglect them, but they don't get the money that some of the other states can put into them. So all of these things, generalized, but these points hold true in a lot of these cases. For backpacking, generally state forests, or if you're in a state without state forests, national forests are your best bet. If you're already comfortable with camping, so you're not concerned with being outdoors at night, you have experience hiking and navigating, so you're pretty confident you're not going to get lost. You're okay with the lack of facilities. When you're backpacking on bigger trails, sometimes there's shelters and they might have a privy. And when I say privy, I mean pit toilet. And when I say a pit toilet, sometimes it is just a hole in the ground with a toilet seat on top of it. No walls, no doors, no nothing. That may be the facilities you have, if you are even lucky enough to have that. If you're okay with depending on yourself or the group that you're with only, it's not uncommon for more remote trails for there to be no one out there. I've done large trips where I haven't seen anybody for 3 days, not a single soul. So if something was to happen while I was out on one of those trips, I only have myself to depend on. You don't always have cell phone service. So you got to be comfortable with being on your own. These areas are usually more rugged, more remote, less frequently maintained, and have less staff. It's not a park. It's a forest. It's meant to be operated that way. State forests may have a main office, a ranger station. They might offer car camping with varying degrees of amenities. Like it might have a fire ring. It might have a picnic table. There might be a bathroom. There might not. You might just drive down a dirt road. There's a spot to pull in your car, and that's where you set up. State forests may contain other land classifications too. So this one's important, such as wild areas, wilderness, natural areas, preserves, to name a few. These areas often limit what can and can't be done in them. And that means anything from camping to the way the land is maintained. So in natural areas, a lot of times you're not allowed to camp, depending on the state. Wilderness, sometimes the governing body that maintains that land isn't allowed to use power tools. They can only cut trees, clear brush, build bridges, move stones by hand. So that means if you get a really bad wind event and there's a really bad blowdown across the trail, it might not get cleared for a while, if ever. It might just be the end of the trail. If they can't get it cleared with hand tools, it's just not happening. They're going to have to reroute around it. So with all that being said, always check regulations. Always get in touch with the district office or its equivalent, either through the website or if you go in person. Ask them if there's any trail closures, if there's any areas where you're not allowed to camp, if you need a permit. You don't always need a permit. Sometimes you do. It depends on if you're by yourself, if you're with the group, if you're planning on staying in one spot for more than one day. It depends. Again, a lot of these areas are maintained differently, even within the same state, between different state forests. So that's a lot of ifs, right? So what if you're new to everything outdoors, hiking and camping included, but you just want to get into backpacking? If you think that you might want to try backpacking, but you don't know how you're going to handle being outdoors by yourself for days at a time, here's something you can try. Rent a campsite at a state park that has lots of trails, maybe even trails that connect into a larger tract of land like a state forest that has more trails on it, so a big trail network. Get to the state park, set up your campsite. If you get there early, set up, have a hike planned, put everything you're going to need for the day in your backpack. Leave your camp gear set, leave your tent or your hammock, whatever you're using, leave that all set up. Don't take that with you. You're going to use your campsite as a base camp. You throw all your food, your water, anything you're going to need for the day. I always suggest taking some extra stuff on these trips because you're training, so you want to have a little more weight in the bag. And then go out and hike around for the day. Try to plan it so that you're getting back to camp right before you're going to make your dinner. You get to camp, you make your dinner, just forget your car is there. Make your dinner, do your camp stuff, get ready for bed, go to sleep. Wake up in the morning. A lot of times you got checkout time of like noon or 3 o'clock. Plan a hike in the morning. Just get up, ignore your cars even there, hit the trail, hike around for a while, come back, break your camp down if you got to leave. If you're only there for a night. If you're there for 2 nights, then just keep repeating that and see how you feel. See how you feel, how well you sleep. See how well you wake up if you want to wake up. See how well you're moving around the next day. And do this, start with an overnight and then do 2 nights or 3 nights until you get comfortable with that process of camping, hiking, camping, hiking. Doing this in the state park is helpful because you do have the amenities. You do have the restroom and the shower, and you've got your car nearby if you need to leave. There's other people around. There's rangers around. There's maps. There's civilization. You don't feel quite as remote as you will when you're backpacking. Once you feel comfortable with that, find a state forest, national forest, that's got a trail that you're allowed to backpack on. Sometimes they call it primitive camping or dispersed camping. Find out what the limitations are. A lot of times they'll say you can't camp any closer than a half mile from the road or 100 feet from the road or something like that. There may be a no camping zone from where your trailhead is to where you can camp. What will happen is you'll get out there, find the first campsite, your first time, go out there, set up and camp. It'll be a completely different experience than it was when you're in the campground. When you're in camp, even if there's a couple of you there, and it gets dark, and there's nothing around you, there's no other campers, there's no restroom, your car is nowhere nearby, it's just you in the forest, it may have a different effect on you than doing the base camp at the campground. That's why I suggest not going that far from the car, staying as close as you legally can to your car. Because then if you really want to bail, then you can pack your stuff down, head out, even throw your headlamp on and leave, and you're not super far away. And then keep doing that, pushing that boundary every time you go out until you feel comfortable going out for 2 nights and then 3 nights. Find small loops that you can start in one spot and loop around and come back over a day or 2. You're going further away from the car every step you go, but you are also heading back to the car every step that you take. It's the best way I can suggest people get into camping and backpacking. Now, if you know someone who backpacks or camps and is comfortable doing that, and they're willing to go with you, that's even better, because then you got someone with some experience with you. But a lot of times, you might have the time to go and no one else has the time to go. And then you might need to do it on your own. It's not for everybody. The first solo trip I did, I didn't even think about it when I went. I had the time. I liked what the weather was doing. I liked camping and hiking in the winter, in snow. So a snowstorm was coming. I had the time. I just headed out. Nobody else was free. It was right around Christmas. Actually, it was Christmas Eve. My plans had fallen through. And so I just went. I just grabbed my stuff and went. And it wasn't until I got to camp and I started setting up and I realized, oh, this is the first time I've done this solo. And I was hooked ever since then. I just did a solo trip last night. So it's not for everybody, but if you can get used to it, once you like it, you'll love it. So a couple of important things to consider, and these are in no particular order. So important things to consider. Always let someone know where you're going and when you'll be back. What I do is there's a group of us who all hike and backpack together. So what I'll do is I will take a map of where I'm going, especially when I'm going solo, a map of where I'm going, which direction I'm going to go, if it's a loop, or where I'm going to start, if it's a point to point, or whatever I'm doing. If it's a point to point with another trail system, I'm going to turn into a loop. I'll give my friends the direction I'm going to go, how far I think I'm going to go each day, where I might spur off to go look at things on the side, when I'm planning on being back. I also look at my phone service. I have T-Mobile. I'll go to T-Mobile's website and I'll look at the overlay of the phone signal coverage over that backpacking trail. And then I'll even let my friends know I've got spotty coverage out there. But as I can, I'll just text them, okay. And then that way, if I say I'm going to be back on a Wednesday and Wednesday night rolls around and no one's heard from me, they start to get a little worried. Thursday rolls around, they haven't heard from me. They can reach out. They can either come out to where I am, or they can get in touch with the local rangers and be like, hey, our friend's out there, and we haven't heard from him. He was supposed to be back yesterday. This is where he says he's going to be. They can pass that information on. You can't always rely on your electronics. And if you get hurt and you have no signal, or your phone dies and no one sees where you are, if no one knows where you are, it's going to be very hard to find you. So always let someone know where you're going. Carry maps, paper maps. You can't rely on your electronics. So state parks almost always have maps. If they've run out of their official maps, they usually, if you go in and talk to the rangers, they usually have a photocopied map. It may not be great, but it's better than having nothing. You can also download maps or take a picture of a map, but don't rely on it. Batteries die, electronics break, GPSs fail. Yes, you can lose a paper map, but especially if I know it's going to rain, I'll take 2 paper maps with me. One I keep in my front pouch, so I have it, easily accessible, and my front pouch is waterproof. And then I keep a second one folded up, put in a Ziploc bag. It goes inside my bag, usually my food container, or inside another waterproof, like stuff sack or something like that. So that way I've always got a backup, just in case. My phone dies, my GPS dies, I lose my first map. A lot of things have to go wrong for me to run out of ways to find out where I am. Bring more food than you'd expect and eat on a schedule, not just when you're hungry. I was really bad at this in the beginning. And then I started setting 2 stop points for meals. I'll pick a mile distance and I'll pick a time. Whichever one I get to first, let's say I make the miles first. When I get to the miles, I'll do kind of a self-check. I'm not hungry. I'll keep going. And if I hit the time next, regardless of whether I'm hungry or not, I stop and eat. It's amazing how many times I'll stop and I'll try to rationalize to myself, I can keep going a little bit further. I'm not that hungry. And then I'll fight with myself. I'll take my pack off. I'll start making my food. And then all of a sudden I'm starving. Never fails. Calories and food are very important on the trail. That's how you keep your energy up. First aid is as much for you as it is for other people on the trail. Water, really important. I see a lot of people hiking without water. I can't say I've never done it. I've done short hikes at like a local preserve where I know I'm only going a couple miles and I'm taking my time, and I'll take my coffee with me. I won't always take water. But if I'm doing a big trip or I'm going somewhere that I don't know where I am, or I'm going a bunch of miles, I've always got water with me, and I usually have a filter with me at the very least. When I'm backpacking, I have a filter with me. I know I can boil water, but in case I can't boil water and my filter breaks, I have Aquamira drops as well. There's some things I'll always carry redundancy for. Water is one of them, because you never know what is upstream from you. Just because the water looks clear doesn't mean there's not something dead in the river upstream. And you got to really be careful of that. Last thing you want is to get a stomach virus on the trail. It's not fun. When you're packing, visualize your trip. And I don't mean every step. I don't mean what birds you're going to see. I mean, when I'm packing my bag, the first thing I think about is food. And I think, how many days am I going to be out? When am I going to start the trip? So how many breakfasts do I need? How many lunches do I need? How many dinners do I need? Now, I usually take an extra meal or 2, just in case. Then I grab my snacks. Then I grab anything that is additional. If I'm going to take hydration mixes or energy chews, I add all that stuff in. My coffee, all that stuff goes in. That's the first thing. Then I just kind of visualize, okay, I'm going to start at the trailhead. I'll hike for a while. I'll stop. I'll have lunch. I'm not thinking of the views or the climbs or the trail junctions. I'm just thinking of the main things that I'll need to take my pack off or that I'll need gear for. And I think, okay, I'm going to have lunch, and then I'm going to keep hiking, and then I'll get to camp, And then I'm going to set up camp. What do I need for camp? I need my hammock. I need my tarp. I need my suspension. I need my quilts. I need my pillow. I need a ground sheet, maybe. And that's going to be it. I take a pillow with me, and I take sleeping socks. So like my 2 luxury things I carry with me, I make sure that those are with me. And then the next day, I already got my food. I'm going to get up. I'm going to hike. And then that's what I do. And I see what I'm going to need. And then after I got all my basics, I look at what I'm going to do for that trip. And is there anything that I might want to take with me? Do I want to take a saw? Do I want to take an axe? I usually always carry a knife, anything extra. And then I'll add that. I'll take my camera gear, battery charger, and then I throw it in and I go. I used to pack a lot more because the next point on my list is you will bring more than you need at first. Dragon calls it packing for your fears. And that's exactly what you do. You're going to take the stuff that you think you're going to need that you can't do without. And when you get done with your trip, the best thing to do is to open your pack and make 2 piles. The stuff you used and the stuff you didn't use. Take note of the stuff you didn't use. And on your next trip, you get home, you unpack your bag, the stuff you used, the stuff you didn't use. The stuff you didn't use, if it's the same stuff, stop taking it. You don't need it. Unless it's something like first aid. All right, if it's something that you absolutely, like first aid or a redundancy product, something like that you don't want to have to use, but it's there just in case. And it's something important. Water, first aid, things like that. But camp lights, chairs, extra sleeping bags, saws and axes. I've carried all kinds of stuff that I did not need. It's amazing what you can get away without taking. The next important thing to consider, downhill doesn't necessarily mean faster or easier. You've always heard the term, it's all downhill from here. Sometimes that's a curse. Because downhill, a gradual downhill, not so bad. 45 to 50 degree angle downhill for a mile or 2, that sucks. And you use muscles in your legs that you didn't even know you had, especially when you're carrying a backpack. Listen to your body. If you're tired, if your feet hurt, if you just want to take a break, take a break. There's nothing to prove. Now, this is the last little group of things to consider. There's nothing to prove. Even if you're trying to prove something yourself, it's not that important. There's nothing to prove. You have nobody to prove anything to. Hike at your own pace. Break when you need to. Bail if you want to. Don't feel you need to do X miles per hour or X miles per day because you saw someone on YouTube do it or you got a friend that can do it. Hike your own hike. Keep your pace. Even when you're in a group, the group I hike with, there's points where if we're going uphill, I don't like to stop when I'm going uphill. Starting and stopping wears me out faster than just getting to the top of the hill and stopping. So I'll go around everybody and I'll get to the top. Now, if it's just me and one other person, I'm not going to leave who I'm hiking with behind. So then I will slow down and I'll just suck it up. But when we got a big group, I just move to the side, go up the hill. Because I know when I'm coming downhill, I'm going to slow down. I did 18 years of cable, climbing ladders, carrying ladders, climbing into attics and crawl spaces and basements and things like that, under desks and TVs. My knees are shot. So when I'm going downhill, I take my time just so I don't have a miserable day. Yeah, and don't worry about how many miles other people do. If you're doing a trail and other people do it in 3 days and you want to do it in 5, do it in 5. When I did the Quijana Trail, I did it in 5 days. I could have done it in 4. I wanted to do it in 7. I wanted 75 miles. I just wanted to do 10 miles a day, nice and easy, enjoy every step, spend time at camp, sleep in, especially when I got to the back side of the trail because I knew there was going to be very few people back there, and I just wanted to be out, remote, in the wilderness for a couple days extra, but the weather wasn't going to allow it. and I had to race the weather back because I even got caught in the rain the last 2 days. There was nothing I could do. But the second day that I got caught in the rain that was coming in on top of that was really bad, and I did not want to get stuck in that. So I wound up just doing it in 5. But yeah, I wanted to do it in more, and who cares? If it would take me 7 days, it would take me 9 days. Who cares? As long as you're enjoying yourself and you're not injured, you're not hurting anyone else, you're out there enjoying it, as long as there's not a time limit set by the department that maintains that land. And usually if there is a time limit, you can usually get a permit for that. If you're going to be there for more than a certain amount of days, all you got to do is talk to them. The worst they can say is no, and then you got to speed up a little bit. Other than that, maybe you cut the trip a little short. You take a loop to cut off a couple miles. Doesn't matter, as long as you're enjoying yourself. And that's it for this episode. I know I've talked in videos, and I think in another podcast I talked a little bit about like beginning stuff and what you need. But I want to look more at how to find the information and some things that are really specific to hiking and backpacking, camping, because it's all the same thing. Backpacking is just hiking, camping combined. Primitive camping, dispersed camping, whatever you want to call it. Always check your regulations. Let somebody know where you are. Have fun. Be safe. And I will talk to you in the next episode.